Hello. Thank you. My name is Kate O'Reilly, and I'm delighted to be with you today, sharing a short personal history of disability arts and culture in the UK. And I want to thank everyone that made this possible, because now, in the time of pandemic, when we're isolated from each other, these opportunities to connect, to engage, to share conversations and perspectives are more important than ever. So I am deeply grateful for this opportunity and for this platform. I will be largely following my talk on the page, so please forgive me if I'm looking down, but we have so many multiple layers of translations and interpretations going on, that seems to be the best way. So thank you. Nothing about us without us. As I said, I'm Kate O'Reilly. I'm an Irish white woman in her 50s with blue eyes, large rimmed glasses. I have brown hair that is asymmetric. It's cropped on one side and very curly on the other. I'm wearing a black shirt and a checked jacket, and I'm speaking to you from my study in West Wales, which has a white painted wooden wall and lots of books behind me. In 2007, Turner Prize nominee artist Yinka Shonibari described disability arts as the last great avant-garde movement. He compared it to the early days of feminism and the Black rights movement, proposing it was a powerful dynamic that spoke more about aesthetic talent and inclusivity than non-normative bodies. I feel it's right to make the comparison with other civil rights movements. For the UK's disability arts and culture evolved from a political movement, the Disabled People's Movement, which began in the 1970s and which I joined and was part of from the late 1980s onwards. This included demonstrations and marches, sit-ins, and working with the Direct Action Network, stopping traffic in days of action, requesting in a very forceful way that public transport and public buildings were indeed public and were not excluding a large proportion of the population, disabled people. My involvement within the disability civil rights movement and disability culture and arts has impacted on the content, form, and aesthetic of my creative work. It has made me the writer that I am. And today, I'd like to share part of that journey with you. I don't look disabled. I have invisible impairments, but I identify proudly as a disabled person, for that is what has made me who I am. It has given me my unique artist and writer's perspective. It has made me, I hope, a better person, one that is expansive, embracing all the possibilities of human variety, rather than being cramped in the narrow, limiting confines of notions of normalcy. And what indeed is normal? For me, disability is the norm. I use the terms disabled and non-disabled as a polarity. I don't use the term able-bodied because at best, this is a temporary, fleeting state. Whether through genetic or congenital conditions, age, illness, accident, conflict, or basic wear and tear, all of us will become disabled if we're fortunate to live long enough. Except disability is perceived as the other, feared, not valued. Until very recently, society didn't value our differences. Disability was equated with shame, with needing fixing, medicalization, normalization. But I believe it is society and its attitudinal and physical barriers that disable us, not our bodies. So often we consider disability as being something other, apart, different from us here. We don't consider a grandparent who may be having issues with memory, or a friend who doesn't hear quite as well as they used to, or an aunt with arthritic knees, or a cousin who sustained a head injury in a road accident as disabled. But they are. Disability is everywhere. There are disabled members in every family and among our ancestors too. I think it's essential to emphasize that the opposite of disabled is not abled, as contemporary attitudes mistakenly believe, but enabled. That's E-N-A-B-L-E-D in English. And the definition of that is to support, facilitate, empower, to make possible or easy. So to be disabled is to be denied support, facilitation, power, and means. This is a very different impact and meaning than how it is commonly and incorrectly used. And this connects to the social model of disability, which I will talk more of shortly. But I believe very strongly it is society and its attitudinal and physical barriers which are the disabling factor, not the body. And I would urge you to reconsider the term disabled in the light that I've just thrown. And I think this shift would be immensely beneficial to society as well as to us all. So what is disability arts? Disability arts and culture can be defined as work made by, for, and about those with impairments, informed by the experience of living in a disabling world. It is work created by and led by disabled practitioners. It is the opposite of arts and disability, which in the UK, at least, has creative expression as something provided for the disabled by non-disabled as part of therapy, treatment, or socialization. Disability culture is disability-led. That is, disabled people are in control and take the lead, direct the gaze, create the content, aspire to or own the means of production as well as the product. In the UK, historically, it is predominantly political, a cultural expression of the experience of disability informed by the social model of disability. If there was one thing that I would like you to take away from my presentation today, that is an understanding of the social model of disability, which is what I work from and what has shaped me. The social model of disability sees disability, like gender, as a social construct. It was developed by disabled people and sees that this model of disability, the social model, reflects the values, prejudices, and fears of a particular society. As I said earlier, we believe very much it is the attitudinal and physical barriers in society that disable us, not our bodies. And this is a very different perspective to the moral or religious model of disability, which sees disability as sins of the father, karma, punishment for wrongdoing in a previous life, or demonic activity. The Christian Bible has Jesus healing disabled people by driving out their demons. The social model is also preferable to the medical model, where the body is at fault, requiring treatment, medicalization, and normalization. With the medical model, the individual is identified by diagnosis or condition, dehumanizing the person. As an aside, I remember very, very strongly my first encounter with the social model of disability when I was a student. I'd always, until that point, been treated almost as a charity figure. Oh, poor Kate. I had sympathy. Or that in some way it was my fault that I wasn't able to access things as other people might. So it was my fault, and I was to blame. And I was lesser or inferior in some ways to other people. When I discovered the social model of disability, I saw that it actually was not my fault, and rather it is the way we create our society that is the issue. It is not it's not inclusive, and everybody benefits from accessible buildings and our civic centres. It's not just something for wheelchair users to have ramps and lifts and so on, but for baby carriages or travellers with suitcases or people making deliveries to buildings and so on. I mean, it isn't something just for the disabled. With that thought, we can make our societies and our public spaces far more inclusive, and we can all benefit from that. But for me, the great benefit of the social model was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I suddenly perceived things differently, which is now why I identify politically as well as culturally as a disabled person, because the social model helped me shift the way that I view the world. As Alan Sutherland wrote back in 1989, I don't think disability arts would have been possible without disability politics coming first. Our politics teach us that we are oppressed, not inferior. Our politics have given us self-esteem. They have taught us not simply to value ourselves, but to value ourselves as disabled people. Disability arts in the UK came out of our political movement for social justice, for our civil rights, and fired by anger at the injustice at being excluded by so much in life. The political movement and its cultural expression created a sense of community and common purpose as people increasingly talked to each other. People with different impairments who had traditionally been taught that their interests were separate and unrelated, began to recognize in each other similar experiences of being marginalized and excluded. The impairments might be very different, but this experience of exclusion was not. According to disability studies scholar Colin Cameron, disability arts has at its heart the principles of transgression, resistance, and affirmation. It is transgressive in that it involves a refusal by disabled people to identify themselves in terms of personal tragedy as the dominant culture represents and seeks to recognize them. It embodies resistance to hegemonic discourses of normality and abnormality. And it affirms by establishing physical difference as something to be expected and respected, valued on its own terms as part of ordinary human experience. Through the development of cabarets, festivals, exhibitions, and performances in the 1980s onwards, the disability arts movement in the UK created spaces in which disabled and deaf people could come together to share and explore with each other insights and perspectives on situations that had previously only been experienced individually. Another quote from Colin Cameron. Disability arts involves a rejection of dominant cultural narratives and assumptions which represent impairment as something to be cured, endured, or overcome, as a sign of misfortune, whichever way it is considered. It also involves a revelation of and a reflection upon the experience of disability as the experience of oppression. Oppression not in terms of having somebody with a big stick hovering above, but identified in the routine, everyday practices of a society that places a high value on normality and anticipates that this is something people with impairments will aspire to, which imposes judgments about the right and proper ways of doing things and characterizes other ways of achieving these same ends as abnormal or inferior. So I'm hoping that is a very short introduction and context to disability arts in the UK. And so moving forward now to my own work in theatre and how that allies with disability experience, perspectives, and aesthetics. Some of the work I've made uses what I call alternative dramaturgies informed by a deaf and disability perspective, with reference to the particular dramaturgies I've developed between deaf culture and hearing culture, between disability culture and mainstream culture. My work is often between these cultures, often answering back or subverting assumptions and negative representations of disabled people. Since the ancient Greeks, in the Western theatrical canon, stereotypical representations of disabled characters have appeared in many plays. And many audiences have taken these depictions as reflecting the actual lived experience of disability. But they're not. Unfortunately, many of these stereotypes still exist today in our media. We are victims or villains, fearful or sentimental, weak and helpless, deranged and psychotic evil geniuses, bitter and twisted because of our impairments or conditions, psychic or with superhuman powers, the super crip of inspiration to others for overcoming our burdens. Or alternatively, we are passive receivers of charity without any form of agency of our own. These negative depictions appear in many plays, as seldom has the playwright been disabled themselves or written from that embodied experience. And this has changed with the emergence of disability arts and culture. So in my work, I'm interested in creating new protagonists with different narratives and with different endings, and in challenging and expanding the actual theatre languages at play in live performance through my engagement with the aesthetics of access. I believe reimagining disability opens up possibilities in content, representation, aesthetics, and form, changing the stories we tell, how they are told, and by whom. Paul Dark and other disability performance scholars, such as Carrie Sandell, have written at length about the limited plot lines for disabled characters. Often, as seen again recently with the 2016 film version of Jojo Moyes' Me Before You, it is emphatically better dead than disabled. In films and plays, stereotypes I mentioned before rule. The blind, wise seer, the evil and twisted mastermind, the hero who overcomes her impairments to pass as non-disabled, the extraordinary superbody. From Tiny Tim in Dickens' A Christmas Carol, to Shakespeare's Richard III, to Sophocles' Oedipus. In the Western theatrical canon, we, disabled people, have been the personification of uselessness or evil incarnate. These stories and characters are so prevalent, Paul Dark maintains, that the audience believe they understand and know disabled experience, even though it is shown through a filter that isolates, individualizes, medicalizes, or finally normalizes the character. What the audience is experiencing are not the truths of our lives, but the long cultural and linguistic practice of ascribing meaning to the atypical body. We are metaphors, something the disabled and deaf actor characters in my meta-theatrical play, Peeling, which was first produced by Grey Eye Theatre Company in 2002, deconstruct, subvert, and ultimately rebel against. As a playwright, I try to present different protagonists and different stories, often challenging contemporary representations of disability. For example, some years ago in the UK, there were various television dramas about survivors of traumatic brain injury. And I tried to address these very disturbing and negative representations in my 2008 play, The Almond and the Seahorse, which is going into production next year as my first feature film. Here, the text subverts notion of brain injury that have been splashed across the media and questions who the real victims are, if indeed there are any victims. Protagonists, their journeys and outcomes can be subverted and changed, offering more possibilities and rich, engrossing drama that avoids stereotypes. This reconsideration of narrative and protagonist is just one element in what I coined alternative dramaturgies, informed by a deaf and disability perspective when I was Arts and Humanities Research Council Creative Fellow at Exeter University's Drama Department between 2003 and 2006. And I further developed it while affiliated with Freie Universitas International Research Centre Interweaving Performance Cultures in 2012 to 2018 in Berlin. Alternative to what? To the mainstream ableist hearing perspective. And by alternative dramaturgies, I mean the content, process, structures and forms that reinvent, subvert, or critique traditional or conventional representations and routes. Back in 2008, frustrated by the perpetuation of these damaging lies and uninformed representations of physical, sensory, neuro and cognitive difference in films, plays and books, I was propelled into making a body of work that sought to reflect the actual experience of disabled and deaf individuals' lives. This project, the D Monologues, started out 11 years ago as fictional monologues I wrote, inspired by over 70 interviews and conversations I had with deaf and disabled people in England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. This later was expanded to include Singapore with And Suddenly I Disappear, the Singapore UK D Monologues in 2018. These monologues were written specifically and only for deaf and disabled performers. I have a very understanding agent, as I will not give the rights to productions featuring non-disabled or hearing actors impersonating disabled or deaf characters in these plays. I call this cripping up. And as one of my actor characters said in Peeling, cripping up is the 21st century's answer to blacking up, which became a slogan. So my initial UK monologues with a D, denoting disability, deaf, difference, diversity, deliciousness. This became part of the Cultural Olympiad, the official festival celebrating the 2012 London Olympics and Paralympics. In Water I'm Weightless was an unlimited commission, a co-production between National Theatre Wales and Wales Millennium Centre and the South Bank Centre in London. And it made an important political and cultural precedent. The first work presented on a national platform, proudly, sexily, and unapologetically, by a disabled writer and all deaf and disabled professional cast, working from a disability perspective, answering back to those problematic representations of disability that I mentioned earlier. Historically, we know why there has been such a dearth of disability perspectives. As Kenny Fries says in Staring Back, the disability experience from the inside out. Throughout history, people with disabilities have been stared at, defined by the gaze and the needs of the non-disabled world. Many times, those who live with disabilities have been isolated in institutions, experimented upon, exterminated. We who live with disabilities have been silenced by those who did not want to hear what we have to say. We have also been silenced by our own fear. The fear that if we told our stories, people would say, see, it isn't worth it. You would be better off dead. For 2 decades, I've been working to make visible these hidden, previously little-known lives, and to give value to them, and to also provide professional opportunities for disabled and deaf artists internationally. And I'm so excited with this initiative and the dialogue that we're commencing together here now. It's not enough to just place an atypical body on stage. Inclusivity and diversity are currently buzzwords internationally. And although I applaud initiatives that aim to integrate more deaf, disabled, and neurodiverse practitioners into theatre productions, I have a caveat. The atypical body is not neutral, and placing a disabled figure on stage is not necessarily a radical act in itself. Much relies on the framing and the controlling artistic perspective, for the atypical body can be used dramaturgically by the director or choreographer to express content and meaning beyond the actuality of the body, and sometimes without the actor's awareness or participation. With my original production of In Water I'm Weightless, which was directed by John E. McGrath, then the artistic director of National Theatre Wales, the actors chose the content they performed from my authored collection of monologues, and they also controlled how they were placed and represented on stage. Several of them had had bad experiences of previously being used as a dramaturgical tool to express subtext or create additional material and meaning beyond the content of the performance text. For me, this is central. Having a politicized disability perspective informed by the social model of disability brings a broadening in attitude, in values, and enables an avoidance of narrow definitions of normalcy, the norm, normality. This perspective, when disability-led, encourages impairments not to be viewed as something to be cured or overcome, but rather as an incitement to embrace the diversity and modes of communication and to use these artistically. I've been an experimenter and one of the pioneers in what's called the aesthetics of access, which is where we place so-called access tools at the center of the process and from the beginning, used creatively rather than scaffolded or tacked on at the end. So these access tools include creative captioning, embedded audio description, integrated sign language, or visual language. I'm interested in a holistic experience where the entire audience engages with the theatre languages at play through their individual modes of communication, rather than as an add-on for a particular part of the audience identified through impairment. For example, audio description and touch tools provided for the visually impaired. I hasten to say I think it's great that we do have these, and it's essential that we do include these so that people can understand and participate and engage. But within my disability arts work, I don't assume one mode of communication. For example, I don't assume that everyone will be able to hear and access spoken language. I also don't like segregating the audience off with those using headphones to listen to audio description, or the smart glasses which have captions inbuilt. I think theatre is one of the few places now where we can come together, a body of strangers rubbing shoulders in pre-COVID days, having an experience together. And I think once the pandemic is over, I will very much be wanting to create this holistic experience where we are all there together and not segregated or separated in some way, and just allowing each of us to engage with the performance through our own particular channels. Whenever possible, such as in my 2002 play Peeling, which I mentioned earlier, I'm interested in embedded audio description, bilingual work in visual and spoken or projected languages, creative captioning, which is integrated into the scenographic design as a central element of the set. So these devices make the work more accessible, yes, but most importantly, they challenge the ingrained assumptions and hierarchies in contemporary theatre and culture. When we change the bodies who perform, design, direct, create, and commission the work in our pleasure palaces. When we change the theatre languages used, the processes and practice are inherently changed too. We can then truly be a place that celebrates all the possibilities of human variety, challenging notions of difference and revoking the old stories and their predictable endings. Our voices, our languages, our modes of communication, our perspectives, our experiences, our lives are important. Being invited to present on prestigious platforms like this is essential and hugely appreciated. I was asked to speak briefly about current concerns, and in our contemporary situation in the UK, in particular, although this is also elsewhere, we are witnessing the systematic dehumanization of disabled people by the government and the state. Prior to this global pandemic, brutal benefit cuts under the auspices of austerity in the UK were described on the 16th of November 2017 as economic murder by the British Medical Journal, which is not a publication known for its sensationalism. A reported 120,000 deaths caused directly by the current British government's austerity policies. The removal of services, access, and support for the disabled and deaf communities have been coupled with deeply negative and damaging media narratives, which in turn create an atmosphere where abuse, prejudice, and violence is further normalized. In the UK, disability hate crime is on the increase. On Wednesday, the 9th of October 2019, just over 1 year ago, the Independent newspaper reported how violent crime against disabled individuals in England and Wales had increased by 41%. And offences with online element had increased by 71%. So we have to keep challenging negative propaganda, the lies. And we need to offer diverse perspectives with alternative expressions of what it is to be human, celebrating all the possibilities of human variety. And this is partly why this festival and my involvement here is incredibly welcomed and important. COVID also, of course, has had another major impact. Disabled people, or those problematically described as vulnerable or with underlying health conditions, have been disproportionately affected. And this is across the world, but the figures I have now are just for the UK. According to the UK's Office for National Statistics, 59% of all deaths involving COVID-19 from March the 2nd to July the 14th this year were of disabled people. But only 16% of the population have disabilities, according to the 2011 census, which does mean that we have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And obviously, this has a global reach. Many in the UK are concerned that we will be left behind in post-COVID days. And so we have new disabled-led campaigning movements like #WeShallNotBeRemoved, which is a forum to advocate, to campaign and support deaf, neurodivergent and disabled creative practitioners and organisations through and after COVID-19. And the aims of the Alliance are to ensure a sustainable future for disability and inclusive arts in the UK through and after the pandemic, and also to amplify the voices of deaf, neurodivergent and disabled creative practitioners and disability arts organisations at a time of crisis for the arts and for disabled people. And so this again is why invitations like this are so important. Perhaps in the aesthetics of access, we can begin changing the experience of theatre along with its languages and start escaping the tyranny of normalcy. But let me end joyfully here with this exchange and this platform opening up to and celebrating the non-normative, the atypical, the bodies, minds, senses that threaten the narrow definition of human variety and broaden the scope of possibilities of what it is to be human. Thank you.
네, 안녕하세요. 무정의 예술주간 토크 시리즈 탭톡 세 번째 프로그램 영국 장애운동과 장애예술의 역사 그리고 희곡을 시작하겠습니다. 네, 먼저 오늘 발표해 주신 케이트 오라일리가 오라일리의 발표로 이 지금 탭톡 3 프로그램이 시작되었습니다. 오늘 탭톡 3 토크는 방금 발표해 주신 물속에서 나는 무게가 없어와 나인프리다의 작가 케이트 오라일리의 발표 그리고 낭독 공연을 연출한 안경모, 안정민 두 분의 토론으로 진행됩니다. 네, 그러면은 세 분 먼저 제가 간략하게 소개해 드리도록 하겠습니다. 케이트 오라일리는 작가, 연출가, 드라마투르그로 그녀의 연극, 스크린, 라디오 작품, 장편 산문들이 널리 출판되고 제작되고 있습니다. 청문화와 농문화, 장애문화와 주류문화를 오가면서 창작자로서 장애인 운동가로서 활발하게 활동하고 있습니다. 네, 이번에 낭독 공연으로 상연된 물속에서 나는 무게가 없다는 2012년 런던 패럴림픽에서 발표된 작품입니다. 네, 그리고 이어서 바로 소개를 드릴 텐데요. 그 나인프리다 연출해 주신 안경모 연출은 연극, 뮤지컬, 무용, 가무학 등 다양한 공연 장르에서 구성 연출을 맡고 계신 활발하게 활동하고 계신 창작자입니다. 네, 뭐 스웨트, 해무 등 대표작이 너무 많아서 제가 두 작품만 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 네, 그리고 물속에서 나는 무게가 없다 연출하신 안정민 연출은 극작 활동과 연출 활동을 함께 하고 계시는 창작자입니다. 그 고독한 목욕, 달걀의 일 등의 희곡을 쓰셨고요. 또 극작 및 연출한 작품으로는 당곰 이야기, 갈비뼈 타령 등의 작품이 있습니다. 네, 그리고 지금 사회를 맡고 있는 저는 연극 평론을 하고 있는 김소연입니다. 안녕하세요. 네, 저기 세 분도 간단하게 인사 좀 해주시죠. 세 분 반갑습니다.
네, 반갑습니다. 안경모입니다.
반갑습니다. 안정민입니다.
네, 지금 그 영국이 아주 이른 아침 시간이라고 알고 있는데, 정말 한 시간 가까운 시간에 굉장히 그 정열적인 발표를 들었습니다. 아주 뜨거운 발표를 흥미롭게 들었습니다. 어떤 면에서는 지금 케이트의 발제를 들으면 발제가 그 영국 장애예술 운동의 역사를 듣는 것 같은 그런 느낌도 들었고요. 또 이번에 또 발제를 들으면서 저희가 disable, able 이런 개념들, 용어들을 소개받았었는데 오늘 또 하나 공부했습니다. unabled라는 가능한 상태라는 개념을 또 새롭게 공부해 보게 되었고요. 저는 또 케이트 발제를 들으면서 관객들, 그러니까는 접근의 도구는 굉장히 중요하지만 접근의 어떤 도구들, 그러니까는 지금 뭐 수어 통역이라던가 음성 해설 등이 부가적인 서비스로 제공됨으로써 관객이 뭔가 분열되거나 위계화될 수 있다라고 지적하신 부분에서 굉장히 고개를 크게 끄덕이게 되었습니다. 네, 아무튼 흥미로운 발표였는데, 자, 그럼 이제 토크를 본격적으로 시작하면서 먼저 오늘 그 패널로 참여해주시는 두 연출님께서 케이트의 발표를 듣고 또 궁금한 점이 생기셨을 것 같아요. 그래서 케이트의 발표에 대한 두 연출님들의 질문을 먼저 듣고 답을 듣도록 케이트에게 답을 요청하도록 하겠습니다. 그 진행을 위해서 연달아서 두 연출님들의 질문을 듣고요. 그다음에 한꺼번에 케이트의 답변을 듣는 방식으로 진행하겠습니다. 네, 먼저 안경모 연출님.
네, 안녕하세요. 안경모입니다. 이른 아침에 방대한 내용의 장애 예술과 관련된 발제를 해주신 케이트 오라일리 선생에게 진심으로 감사를 드립니다. 장애 예술을 종교적이고 도덕적인 모델이나 의학적이고 치료적인 모델이 아니라 사회적이고 정치적인 모델로서 접근하는 것에 매우 공감을 합니다. 특히나 비정형적인 어떤 신체성이 가져다주는 비장애인들은 쉽게 접하지 못하는 어떤 세상에 대한 경험, 이해 또는 남다른 태도라는 것들이 비정형적인 예술 활동 자체를 자극하고 가치를 부여를 하게 돼서 어찌 보면은 최근에 이제 모델로서 얘기하고 있는 긍정적 모델까지 이르게 만드는 의미들을 가지고 있다고 생각을 합니다. 결국은 이는 차이와 다름에 대한 저항의 차원을 넘어서서 차이와 다름 때문에 가치를 가지게 된다라는 어떤 다양성과 포용성이 가지는 어떤 동시대적인 의미까지 부여한다라고 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그런 의미에서 저 또한 장애예술을 현대예술과 현대미학에 있어서의 아방가르드라고 저도 부르고 있는데 잉카 소니바레가 말씀하신 마지막 위대한 아방가르드라고 칭하는 것에 대해서 대단히 깊게 공감을 하고 있습니다. 발제문을 쭉 들으면서 저는 장애 예술이 가지고 있는 사회적 가치에 대한 부분들을 많이 이해는 좀 하게 됐었는데 앞서 언급해 주신 장애 예술이 가진 어떤 미학적 재능이라는 단어를 쓰셨는데요. 그런 미학적 재능, 예술적 가치라는 것은 어떤 것인지 미학과 예술의 관점에서 조금 말씀을 더 보완해 주시면 고맙겠습니다.
네, 안정민 연출님도 이어서 질문해 주시기 바랍니다.
네, 우선 아침에 너무 감사드립니다. 다시 한번 가슴이 뜨거워지는 그런 발제였고 너무나 잘 들었습니다, 작가님. 저는 질문을 이어서 하도록 하겠습니다. 작가님의 코로나에 대응하는 연맹에 저는 깊은 감명을 받았습니다. 접근성의 미학과 코로나 시대라는 시대적 특수성이 만나서 완전히 새로운 무대 예술 혹은 정상성의 좁음을 폭로할 수 있는 다양한 전략들이 있지 않을까 하는 희망에 사로잡혔습니다. 그러나 사실은 솔직히 고백하자면 이러한 깨달음은 저에게 아직은 조금 추상적으로 남아 있는데요. 그래서 작가님께 조언을 듣고 싶습니다. 작가님께서 앞으로의 장애미학과 코로나 시대의 연관 사이에서 생각하신 새로운 극작 전략이 있으시면 여쭙고 싶고 작가님의 팬이 된 입장으로서 차기작에 대해서도 여쭙고 싶습니다. 그리고 추가하자면 저는 조금 삼키기 어려운 단어가 있습니다. 영국에서는 어떤 상황일지 모르겠지만 한국에서 유행하는 코로나 시대에 대한 별칭 비슷한 건데요. 바로 뉴 노멀 시대입니다. 저는 이 단어가 마치 정상성이 당연히 다음 시대에도 있어야 된다는 것을 상정하는 것 같아서 들을 때마다 조금은 상처가 되는데요. 작가님이라면 코로나 시대에 어떤 별칭을 붙이실지 궁금합니다.
네, 두 연출님들의 질문 들었습니다. 장애 예술이 가진 미학적 의미에 대한 질문을 이제 또 조금 더 케이트 작가의 이야기를 더 듣고 싶어하는 것 같고요. 그다음에 이제 안정민 연출께서는 뉴 노멀에 대한 새로운 별칭에 대해서 그리고 차기작 등에 대해서 질문이 있었습니다. 케이트 작가님 각각의 연출의 질문에 대해서 답해 주셔도 좋고요. 아니면 한꺼번에 뭉뚱그려서 답변해 주셔도 좋습니다. 답변 부탁드리겠습니다.
Lovely, thank you. Yes, that's quite a lot all at once. So I'll try and take bit by bit, and I'll request you to help guide me if I'm not quite engaging fully with the question. To start with the last one first, this notion of the new normal, if I may just address that, I also have problems with this, people talking about, now here we are in COVID, this is the new normal. Although we hear people say, we can't wait to get back to normal. And I think, like you, I have problems with this language and with this word. I try not to use normal, or what I do is just constantly challenge it, as I did in my talk, and say, what is normal? Because my normal is not your normal. And I'll have to keep thinking over what might be an alternative that I would suggest rather than the new normal. I can't think of anything immediately on the top of my head, but I think it would be a wonderful idea to find new vocabularies and new slogans that might challenge, I think, quite lazy and very kind of ableist language and attitudes that unfortunately is very, very common and commonly used. So just at this moment, I would applaud you for saying that this is a problematic term. I think perhaps just in your interactions or when you hear somebody using that phrase, perhaps just to raise a question and go, what is normal? And what might therefore be a better term? But sorry, I just wanted to jump on that one straight away. Regarding what the aesthetic talent or the artistic value of disability art, from my own perspective, I think that what it does is show or reveal or share very, very different perspectives, perhaps ways of engaging, perceiving the world that hasn't widely been shared before. And I think in the UK and many other places, unfortunately, for a long time, there was a low expectation of the quality or value of disability arts or deaf arts. And part of this was just, it took us a while to get skilled up and to also be given the opportunity and the space to be expressive as artists. Disabled and deaf people have internationally and historically been segregated and denied access to education and training. Some of the collaborators I work with were denied access to drama schools, for example. And so we've had to find alternative routes and different ways of becoming skilled and trained. So quite early on in our movement, particularly when it was disabled-led, we had a lot to catch up. We had to try and work very hard with the quality of the work we were presenting. And unfortunately, often people would then view it either as being inferior or something that should be more in the third sector rather than in our main houses or our main galleries. I think we have caught up quite a lot through taking and demanding opportunities and platforms where alternative aesthetics and perspectives and processes are being explored rather than following perceived, this is the way of doing it. When you are working from very different perspectives, using very different channels or modes of communication or engagement, that is going to revolutionize the process as well as hopefully the product. And I think what is happening now is this extraordinary value, artistic value, and aesthetic exploration and experimentation that is coming across the world from disabled and deaf artists who are making the so-called mainstream reconsider what art is, what theatre is, what theatre languages are in play, what a performance might be, and so on. And so I think there's a very great value in this, which is, of course, why, as I said to begin with, Shonibari said that it was perceived as this avant-garde movement. I think the world and the mainstream are now waking up to that and beginning to see the value and the experimentation and the alternative modes of expression that are coming out of the disabled and deaf communities internationally. And I think we're only just beginning. I think the possibilities are immense, and it's incredibly exciting to see so many places, such as South Korea and this festival, really embracing this and doing the best that they can in providing platforms and places of discussion. So I do think it is new. I think it is fresh. I think it can make us reconsider our hierarchies and our forms, as well as reinventing and showing unique perspectives that perhaps have not been so widely available before. So I hope that might answer that question. If there is anything you would like to counter or respond, please do, before I move on to another question.
네, 안경모 연출님 혹시 덧붙이고 싶으신 거나 더 추가 질문하고 싶으신 거나.
아니요, 잘 들었습니다. 좁은 울타리를 벗어나서 망망대해로 여행을 떠날 수 있다라는 희망이 만들어질 것 같고 그런 부분들을 우리 장애 예술가들이 펼칠 수 있다는 부분에 있어서 몹시 흥분감과 기대가 아주 크게 느껴지는 부분입니다. 좋은 답변 너무 감사합니다. 우리 안정민 연출이 질문했던 대답들을 이어서 들었으면 좋겠습니다. 질문에 대한 대답을.
네, 뉴노멀에 대한 답변 굉장히 인상적이었고 질문도 인상적이었습니다. 안정민 연출님. 그리고 이제 관점을 변화시키는 것이 어떻게 세상에 대한 이해 그리고 예술을 바꾸고 또 우리의 사회를 바꾸는지에 대해서 말씀해 주신 부분 충분히 어떤 장애 예술의 미학적 가치, 예술적 가치에 대해서 답변이 된 것 같습니다. 실제로 저희가 한국에서도 굉장히 뛰어난 흥미로운 장애예술 작업들이 계속 발표되고 있습니다. 그래서 아마 이 장애예술을 계속 보신 분들이라면 케이트의 말이 얼마나 케이트의 말에 대해서 공허한 주장이 아니라는 걸 충분히 아실 수 있을 것 같고요. 안정민 연출께서 첫 번째 질문으로 혹시 이런 코로나라는 이 지금의 현재의 상황이 작가님이 앞으로 작품을 하시는데 어떤 영향을 미칠 것인지 아니면 어떤 그에 따른 어떤 새로운 모색이 있으신지에 대한 질문이 있었던 것 같습니다. 그에 대해서 답변 마저 해주셨으면 합니다.
To start addressing that. First of all, as a playwright coming from a disability perspective and informed also by that, the alternative dramaturgies I discussed earlier, this is something that I have been still developing. I'll talk about the COVID-19 in a moment, but what I've been trying to do as a playwright and a dramaturg is to create, for example, bilingual performances between spoken and projected, captioned, languages, and also visual languages. And what that enables me to do, as in some of my past plays like Peeling, it allows me to have several dramaturgical threads going on at the same time, so that everybody gets the same information, but not necessarily at the same time. So sometimes, for example, in my play Peeling, which is nearly 20 years old now, but is still going into production and considered really quite radical even now. What I've done with Peeling is you can almost, if you were a member of the audience that used sign language, you would have a slightly different trajectory through the play than if you were following, the spoken text. And for me, this is incredibly exciting and complex. And this also partly connects to the previous question about what is the artistic value as well as the aesthetic talent, because you can end up creating immensely complex work dramaturgically with various channels running simultaneously and interweaving. And that can really create a fascinating experience also for the audience. Because perhaps sometimes I will privilege visual language or sign language over spoken. And so what that kind of thing does is when that happens in the audience, first of all, the privileged hearing majority will often go, what's going on? Where's my translation? Why is stuff going on that I can't access? And it's as a political act as well as a cultural act. I think it's very helpful for those of us with the privileged hierarchical mode of presentation actually maybe might experience what it's like to not immediately have that support and interpretation and translation going on. So it can be a kind of artistic experience as well as a cultural and political one. So I'm still very much exploring this kind of strategy. This is what I try to do in some of my plays, not all of them, but those where I can be experimental with form. This is the area I'm very, very keen to explore, because by playing with the theatre languages in different ways, we in effect dramaturg the audience. It actually comes off the stage and into the auditorium, where we start going, some of us are getting information through certain channels and some of us are not. So what does that create for the audience in that live moment? And what does it reveal to us about our hierarchies and power, and often the systemic ableism that we have in our structures and our culture and our modes of presentation. So this is a strategy I'm still continuing and developing, and I'm very engaged with, because it's incredibly exciting and feels very fresh and new and has many, many possibilities. Regarding COVID-19, it's COVID-19, of course, we're in the midst of it. And we in Europe, I'm afraid, have not been faring as well as you in South Korea and other parts of the world. And, where I've just come out of lockdown. I'm in Wales. But England is still in a month-long lockdown. So we still are very much separated from each other and segregated. We're not able to meet, even in extended families, never mind meet in auditoriums and be audience together for a live experience. So some of the strategies have been obviously online for COVID-19. Various companies have been making all sorts of experiments with Zoom and with the different platforms, with live streaming, to try and ensure that in some way performance continues. The question is always about the liveness of that. As I mentioned earlier, for me, there is something about us gathering almost as we did back around the fire, where stories began back in the kind of mists of time. There is trying to create a community through virtual experience is challenging us all, but we're all trying that. But it still is nothing compared to when we are sharing our heartbeats in real time, in real space, breathing together, sharing an experience together. So whatever strategy that we are doing with COVID-19 currently while we're being segregated, I think can never match that lived experience and that sharing. Although this is quite a remarkable connection and sharing I feel that I'm having now, and having this opportunity here also with you in South Korea. I participated in live stream readings of work, and obviously yourselves, you were directing readings as well, just very recently. But last week, for example, I was involved in a live stream rehearsed reading of one of my new plays with Theatr Clwyd, who are a company based in North Wales. And I've written a new version of Strindberg's Miss Julie. And Miss Julie is very problematic in our 21st century situation. It can be misogynistic. There are some issues around social Darwinism and eugenics that can be challenging, and also the ending of this classic play. And so another strategy that I'm taking, partly pre-COVID, but also during COVID, is to look again at these old classics from the Western theatrical canon and seeing how we might reinterpret them. So my version of Miss Julie, which is usually the taboo originally was between, the upper class lady of the house having a liaison with her servant. So it was around class. In my version, I'm looking at disability. So this is another one of my ongoing strategies, where in a mainstream context with a classic mainstream play, I am reinventing the contexts and bringing in disability content and politics, which makes sense because of where I set that play. I set that play in Wales in 1919, which would have been between the two world wars, when, after the First World War, a huge amount of the soldiers came back disabled. So it was a point when disability was the so-called norm. And so in that kind of historical context, I'm able to look at a classical play, but then also bring in disability politics. Partly what we did also online in our COVID-19 days is we played with the actors reading aloud the stage directions as an almost audio description. We were not able to be in the same space, unlike your readings. We were doing it on Zoom with all the director and the actors and myself all in our separate houses coming together on the screen. So we weren't even in the same space. And there became something very interesting in the actor speaking their action as audio description, creating a strange intimacy through Zoom. And so that's also one of the explorations of strategy that we're looking at with COVID-19. Miss Julie, as I say, was one of my, that's an ongoing project. I have also recently made a piece called The Beauty Parade, which was in production just before we went into lockdown with COVID-19. And this was a commercially successful piece, as well as critically acclaimed, that again used a so-called mainstream platform, but used the aesthetics of access. We didn't even draw attention to that. And this became quite delightful, where we had sold out performances for the Beauty Parade, which was a story about, based on a historical fact of women spies during World War II. But what we did was use visual language and creative captioning as part of the scenography for the whole piece. And what was very gratifying was it was wonderfully received. The audiences came, it was sold out. And it was actually a very radical piece of work in the modes of presentation, in that it was a musical that was signed and had visual language, sung language, projected language, and musical language all happening simultaneously. And we just presented that without making any comment on the fact that we might have disabled or deaf practitioners involved. And that I felt was very exciting as a way for the future post-COVID-19, where we're not going, right, we are going to have visual language and we are going to have to do this as an accessible thing. We're going, no, this is at the heart of the aesthetic. It's the fabric of the aesthetic that we created, this wonderful interweaving of the different performance languages and cultures.
네, 답변
So I
감사합니다.
hope that's it all.
어떤 점에서는 저희가 이제 팬데믹으로 인해서 정상성이 이제 멈춘 어떤 노멀이라는 것이 멈춘 상황에 대해서 굉장히 당황해하고 있는데 지금 KT의 이야기는 물론 당황스럽긴 하지만 워낙 장애예술은 새로운 시도들을 끊임없이 했고 계속 대안적인 방법을 찾고 있었기 때문에 그 작업을 계속 해갈 것이야. 뭐 이제 이런 말씀 해주셨고요. 그다음에 또 그럼에도 불구하고 이제 여전히 우리가 라이브니스의 문제, 공연 예술을 하는 사람들 입장에서는 그게 이제 굉장히 큰 과제가 되어 있는데요. 근데 또 어떤 점에서 보면 저희가 이 와중에도 줌으로 공연을 만들고 연습을 하고 또 저희도 지금 그렇게 하고 있죠. 줌과 어떤 온라인 플랫폼을 이용해서 대화하려고 노력하고 또 이것이 뭔가 한 공간을 점유하면서 만들어지는 현장성과는 또 다른 그 절실함 이런 거를 주면서 어떤 관계를 깊이 있게 만드는 것 같습니다. 혹시 또 두 연출님들 추가해서 질문하시고 싶으신 거? 네. 예, 그러면 오늘 지금 이제 그럼 이제 다음 이야기로 넘어가 봤으면 좋겠습니다. 오늘 두 공연이 온라인에서 개막이 됐습니다. KT의 물속에서 나는 무게가 없다 그리고 나인프리다 두 작품이 낭독 공연으로 온라인 상영이 이제 시작이 됐는데요. 그렇게 이것으로 KT의 희곡이 처음으로 한국어로 공연되었습니다. 그래서 오늘은 굉장히 어떤 기억할 날입니다. 왜냐하면 한국어로 KT의 희곡을 처음으로 이제 관객들이 함께 볼 수 있었던, 비록 극장에서는 아니지만 처음으로 볼 수 있었던 그런 날입니다. 저도 이번 그 낭독 공연을 통해서 사실은 KT 희곡을 처음 알게 됐습니다. 처음 접하게 됐습니다. 저는 희곡도 굉장히 흥미로웠고요. 공연도 굉장히 흥미로웠습니다. KT 두 작품이 상당히 다른데요. 그러니까 길이도 다르고요. 길이도 다르고 굉장히 다른 이야기인데 의외로 또 굉장히 어떤 공통점이랄까요? 작가의 스타일 같은 게 느껴졌습니다. 그게 뭐냐면 나인프리다 대사 중에 밀러볼을 언급하는 부분이 있습니다. 이제 프리다에 대해서 수군거리는 사람들이 저 여자는 밀러볼 같아. 뭐 본질이 없어 반짝거리기만 하지 뭐 이제 이런 식으로 수군거리는데 저는 KT의 희곡이 뭔가 밀러볼 같다는 생각을 했는데 그게 뭐냐면 그 반짝임 자체가 본질인 그래서 이 세상에 되게 어떤 편견, 통념 이런 것들이 KT의 희곡을 통과하면서 밀러볼에 빛이 닿아서 반짝반짝 이렇게 퍼져나가는 거가 흩뿌려지는 것처럼 그렇게 흩뿌려지면서 어떤 아름다운 세계를 다시 구성한다라는 생각이 들었습니다. 굉장히 흥미롭게 봤고요. 저희가 이야기를 조금 더 진전시키기 위해서 KT가 이 늦은 시간에 저희 이제 한국에서는 뭐 활동을 하고 있는 낮 시간에 개막이 됐지만 지금 영국에서는 심야 시간에 낭독 공연이 개막이 됐는데 그걸 보셨다고 해요. 그래서 일단 아마도 지금까지는 저희가 이제 KT에게 질문을 드렸는데 이제 KT가 두 연출에게 질문을 드릴 기회를 드리도록 하겠습니다. 어쨌건 한국어로 번역되고 처음으로 한국 배우들과 함께 한국 관객들에게 이제 희곡을 소개한 공연이었는데요. 혹시 두 연출에 대해서 연출들에게 KT 질문하실 게 있으신지요? 그 각자에게 질문해 주셔도 좋고요. 아니면 뭐 두 분께 공통 질문을 해 주셔도 됩니다.
I'm afraid I have not managed to see Nine Fridas yet, but I have seen In Water I'm Weightless. The Nine Fridas, I think it was 4 a.m. UK time when it was available. So I'm hoping to see it after we've had our engagement. So I'm so sorry I'm not able to comment on the Nine Fridas, but I'm very excited and very curious to see. I enjoyed very much In Water I'm Weightless, and I thank the director and the terrific performers for what they did. I was very moved by, even though we're having to have our social distancing, I still felt a sense of ensemble and people really being together, sharing these monologues. And I was intrigued by some of the sound effect that was brought in. So we had the sound of, water bubbling sometimes for In Water I'm Weightless. And I suppose I would be intrigued to know if the director has any further ideas about how either using like the sound effects or also perhaps with physical staging, having had these few days rehearsal, is there any ideas of how she'd like to present them, how she'd like to do perhaps a full production of the monologues?
일단 사실은 물 사운드 이펙트로 물소리를 쓰려고 엄청나게 노력을 했었어요. 왜냐하면 In Water I'm Waitress를 와터를 쓴다는 게 되게 뭐랄까 너무 직접적이라서 조금 더 좋은 아이디어가 없을까라고 되게 고민을 많이 하다가 그렇지만 그럼에도 불구하고 우리는 물 속에 있어야 된다는 생각을 하게 됐었고, 그래서 어떤 부분은 제가 녹음을 해서 사운드 이펙트를 직접 넣기도 하면서 물을 좀 관찰을 했었습니다. 그렇게 넣었고, 왜 그것이 저한테는 핵심적이었는가를 생각을 해보면 저에게는 작가님의 작품 속 대사 중에 어쨌든 나의 아수라장이 필요하고, 그것은 아수라장이 아니라 그냥 나의 세계잖아요. 그냥 그 세계를 물질적으로 일단 낭독으로서 표현을 하려면 일단 워터가 필요하다고 생각을 했던 것 같아요. 그리고 저는 그런 사람, 욕조를 되게 좋아해요. 얼마나 욕조를 좋아하냐면 그 고독한 목욕이라는 것도 욕조 내용이거든요. 그래서 그 모든 연극에 좀 물이 많이 나와요. 저는 왜 이렇게 물을 좋아할까? 그리고 사실 In Water I'm Waitress를 좋아하는 것도 사실 물이라는 어떤 심볼이 저한테 많이 다가왔었어요. 근데 저라는 사람에게도 물이 중요했던 이유는 언제나 저에겐 아수라장이 필요했던 거고, 저만의 원리와 저만의 원칙이 필요했던 것 같고, 그게 언제나 사회에서는 받아들여지지 않는 상처가 있었던 것 같아서 작가님의 희곡을 보고 저도 되게 많이 힘이 났어요. 두 번째는 작가님께서 그 오늘 강연 그 발제해 주신 것 중에서도 enabled 그 말 자체가 장애와 비장애, 이것이 약간 그 연속성상에 있는 것이라는 말이 저한테는 되게 힘이 됐어요. 어떤 것을 더 이해할 수 있고, 모든 것이 물속에 있을 때는 우리는 아무튼 간에 우리가 함께 어떤 공간 안에 있다는 것을 물리적으로 알 수 있잖아요. 제가 너무 당해서 말을 계속 늘어났는데요. 작가님, 만약에 무대에 물리적으로 연출을 한다면 저는 물성을 계속 살리고 싶어요. 왜냐면 물성이야말로 이 모든 조각조각 난 이야기들을 어떻게 하나로 뭉치는 것이 아니라 하나로 물리적으로 가치 있게 해주는 구성 요소일 것 같고 물리적인 원칙일 것 같아요. 그래서 물성 사운드 이펙트를 더 좀 막 이렇게 사실 좀 낭독이라서 안 나온 것도 있었어요. 그래서 또 더 세련되게 하고 싶고 그리고 거대한 그런 상상은 저를 언제나 힘이 나게 했거든요. 저는 제가 다리가 있다는 게 뭐랄까 어릴 때는 만족스럽지 않았어요. 왜 나한텐 다리가 있을까 꼬리가 아니라 나는 꼬리를 가지고 싶은데 그래서 약간 그런 어떤 다양한 신체성들을 더 사실 마지막 부분에 우리가 춤추는 것도 있었는데 아쉽게도 낭독 공연 그 온라인 스트리밍에 안 나갔거든요. 근데 아마 더 보실 수 있을 거예요. 그렇게 신체성과 다양한 신체에 대한 상상력 그리고 사운드 이펙트 물속이라는 것을 새로운 원칙을 보여줄 수 있는 어떤 물리적 공간을 구성을 해서 연출을 할 것 같습니다. 네, 흥미롭게 봐주셔서 너무 감사합니다. Thank you for watching.
네, 감사합니다. 물속에서 나는 무게가 없다 공연을 보면 이제 뭐 낭독 공연이어서 그랬겠지만 이렇게 그 조명으로 이렇게 스폿 조명을 통해서 공간이 갑자기 나타났다 또 사라졌다 하는 연출을 하셨는데 의외로 그것이 저는 이제 그런 빛을 사용한 것이 뭔가 물 속에서 갑자기 떠오르고 이렇게 사라지고 하는 그런 느낌들을 받았습니다. 네, 이어서 공연은 못 보셨다고 아직 이제 그 낭독 공연 못 보셨다고 하셨는데 혹시 그 안경모 연출께 질문하실 거 있으신지 궁금하신 것이나.
Thank you. Yes, I must please apologize to you. I haven't been able yet to see the Nine Fridas, so please excuse me for that. But 4 a.m. was a little too early for me to have to get up to then also have this conversation. But I was very intrigued to know how you might have approached the multiple Fridas, and also I describe the Nine Fridas dramaturgy as a mosaic. So I think it's interesting our convener talking about the mirror ball, because in many ways that is the kind of image I was working with dramaturgically. I wrote the Nine Fridas partly out of frustration of very, very reductionist representations of Frida Kahlo in Hollywood movies and other plays and so on. And I wanted to make her so big she could not be reduced down to the poor little broken betrayed wife, which is unfortunately how she's usually represented. And so I deliberately wanted to make something that had lots and lots of short scenes with different aesthetics, different tone. And I would love to know what kind of challenge that was to your directorial approach, and what might have been the challenges, but also the positive things to this kind of post-dramatic text.
나인 프리다를 접근하면서 제일 먼저 고민했던 부분들은 프리다 칼로를 재현하는 게 이 작품의 목적은 아니라고 생각을 했습니다. 어쩌보면은 프리다 칼로의 삶에서 보여질 수 있는 다양한 어떤 고민들, 고통, 그리고 어떤 그 삶과 세계와의 갈등의 관계 속에서 벌어지는 다양한 어떤 모습들을 현재 나의 모습에서부터 출발해야 된다라고 생각을 했습니다. 그래서 나인 프리다라고 표현되어 있어서 프리다 칼로에 대한 삶을 기대할 수 있겠지만 그것보다는 참여하는 배우들, 나의 모습, 나의 고민, 나의 지금 현재에 더 집중하려고 생각을 했고요. 그러다 보니까 캐스팅 과정에서도 우리 케이트가 기대했던 것처럼 다양한 배우들이 참여했으면 좋겠다. 다양한 어떤 장점을 가지고 있는 그런 배우들이 이 공연에 참여했으면 좋겠다. 그리고 신체성으로서도 다양하게 보일 수 있는 그런 배우들이 참여했으면 좋겠다라고 생각을 해서 그렇게 캐스팅의 과정들을 좀 했었었고, 아까 말씀드렸던 것처럼 프리다를 재현하려고 하는 게 아니라 내가 프리다라면, 내가 프리다의 삶의 어떤 고민을 내가 담아 본다면 나에게 있어서 어떤 모습일까, 이런 어떤 질문으로 이 작품을 좀 풀어가려고 많이 노력을 했던 것 같습니다. 그게 어쩌보면 지금 그 포스트 드라마적인 어떤 현상이라고 얘기하시는 그것에 좀 근접되어지는 것이 아닐까라는 생각을 하고 했었습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 그 케이트는 아직 못 보셨지만 저는 봤거든요. 그 낭독 공연을 보고 나니까 자꾸 더 욕심이 생기더라고요. 아, 이거 낭독 말고 진짜 본 공연을 한번 보면 정말 재밌겠다라는 생각을 했습니다. 그리고 특히 이제 캐스팅에서 또 이렇게 다양한 배우들이 나왔고요. 직접 보세요. 제가 더 설명 안 드리겠습니다. 네, 지금 저희는 무장의 예술 주간 탭톡 세션 3 영국 장애 운동과 장애 예술의 역사 그리고 희곡 토크를 진행하고 있습니다. 그 케이트와 안정민 연출, 그다음에 안경모 연출 나와서 토론을 하고 있습니다. 저희 지금 그 유튜브를 통해서 이 토론이 송출되고 있는데요. 지금 댓글창을 봤더니 질문이 하나 들어와 있습니다. 제가 조금 정리해서 말씀드리면 이제 영국 작가의 작품이고 사실 이제 이 작품은 지금 이제 여기 댓글에는 영국 장애인분들과 이야기를 만드셨다 했는데 제가 알기로 나인 프리다 같은 경우에는 좀 다국적 협업 프로젝트였던 것으로 알고 있고요. 아무튼 이제 영국 작가의 희곡이고 또 영국 혹은 다른 나라 예술 아티스트들과 만든 작품인데 이 작품을 한국 배우들과 지금 이번에 이제 낭독 공연을 만드셨는데 그때 이제 한국 배우분들과 이제 작품을 만들면서 어떤 이야기를 나눴는지 또 한국 배우분들의 생각은 어떠셨는지 이런 질문이 들어와 있습니다. 아마도 이거는 두 연출께 드리는 질문인 것 같아요. 네. 두 분 각각 말씀해 주시면 좋겠습니다.
네, 일단 영국적인 문화가 상당히 많이 녹아 있는 텍스트였어요. 제가 연출했던 희곡은 그래서 작가님께는 죄송하지만 예를 들면 영국에서 유명한 워키토키라는 무전기 같은 경우는 한국어로 고쳐서 짹짹이라고 하기도 하고 그런 식으로 좀 한국 문화에 적응을 할 수 있도록 조금 고쳤고요. 그런 방식의 드라마터지가 조금은 있었습니다. 그리고 이제 뭐 예를 들면 그런 것도 있잖아요. 루르드강의 성수 같은 어떤 기독교적인 문화 같은 것이 거기 영국에서 가지는 것과 한국에서 가지는 질감이 좀 많이 달라서 그런 것들을 어떻게 전달을 하면 될지를 많이 고민을 했고요. 그리고 또 배우들 입장에서도 일단은 전달의 목표도 있지만 배우들이 당사자성을 가지고 이해를 해야 되는 부분들이 있어서 그런 점에 대해서 많이 고민을 하고 얘기를 많이 나눴던 것 같습니다. 근데 이제 아무래도 영국적인 유머 코드 이런 것들은 이 작품의 상당한 매력이기도 해요. 그래서 그런 것들을 그런 어떤 시니컬함 네, 그런 어떤 영국적인 시니컬함이 있잖아요. 그런 것들은 작가님의 매력이기도 하고 영국 문화의 매력이기도 해서 이걸 어떻게 한국으로 가져올까라는 것에 있어서 되게 작품이 올라가는 그 시점까지 고민을 많이 하면서 조금은 바꾸기도 하고 조금은 원래대로 두기도 하면서 공연을 했었고요. 그런 점에 있어서는 만약에 본 공연이 올라간다면 더 많은 대화가 있을 것 같아요. 이런 어떤 그 문화를 독해하는 것은 되게 그냥 한 연출이 그냥 어떤 독단적인 입장을 가지고만 할 수는 없는 것 같고 작가와 연출 간의 더욱더 긴밀한 관계 속에서 이루어져야 되는 부분이라고 이번에 한 번 더 느꼈던 것 같습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 안경모 연출님도.
그 나인 프리다라는 작품은 영국 문화 또는 영국 배경으로만 출발하기에는 이미 프리다 칼로라는 사람이 가지고 있는 화가가 가지고 있는 멕시코라는 배경 그리고 그 뿌리가 되고 있는 마야 문명, 아즈텍 문명이라는 부분들이 사실은 연결되어져 있는 부분이 있기 때문에 영국 작가가 해석한 프리다 칼로 멕시코 화가에 대한 해석 그리고 그것을 한국 연출가, 한국 배우가 해석하는 역시 멕시코 화가에 대한 어떤 해석 그리고 마야 문명과 아즈텍 문명에 대한 어떤 이해 이런 것들이 되어 있기 때문에 어찌 보면은 겹이 한 겹 더 있는 느낌이 드는 작품이기는 합니다. 온전히 저희가 이 멕시코 문화에 대해서 다 풀어낸다라는 건 한계가 좀 있을 거고요. 또한 한편으로 그것을 다 배제해서 한국화시킨다라는 부분들 또한 이 작품에 대한 해석은 아니라고 생각을 합니다. 어찌 보면은 비교 문화적인 어떤 층위들을 그대로 무대 위에 올려주는 것 이것이 아마 우리가 연극으로서 작업을 할 때에 가지게 되는 태도가 아닐까라는 생각들이 들고요. 그런 의미에서 우리 배우들이 나로부터 출발한다라는 것 자체는 나라는 현재를 살아가고 있는 사람이 과거에 1930년대 40년대를 몸부림치면서 살았던 프리다 칼로의 삶을 바라보는 것 그리고 그녀가 바라보았던 서구 문화와 그 고대에 있어서의 마야 문명과 아즈텍 문명을 다가가는 것 이 모든 것들을 동시에 병렬적으로 펼쳐놓는 작업이 되지 않을까라는 생각이 들고 그게 아마 우리 시대를 살아가는 사람들이 가지게 되는 다층적인 어떤 삶의 모습이 되지 않을까라는 생각을 하고 있습니다.
네, 그 작품이 서로 좀 달랐던 것 같아요. 물속에서 나는 무게가 없다 같은 경우에는 이제 모놀로그로 이어지다 보니까 훨씬 내밀하고 자기의 어떤 문화적 정체성이나 사회문화적 정체성들이 이제 굉장히 단단하게 묶여있던 반면에 나인 프리다 같은 경우에는 그 다국적 프로젝트였다는 이야기를 들었습니다. 그러다 보니까 이제 그래도 프리다라는 그 인물도 그렇고요. 이제 그래서 그런 보편성이랄까요? 뭐 이제 이런 것들이 더 두드러졌던 것 같습니다. 이게 이야기가 계속 진행이 되면서 뜨거워지니까 또 질문이 또 들어왔습니다. 이거는 케이트에게 하는 질문인 것 같은데요. 제가 조금 정리해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 아까 미스 줄리 작업에 대해서 소개를 해주셨는데 이런 질문입니다. 고전 작품을 교육적으로 가져갈 때 어떤 관점이 논의되는지 궁금합니다. 그러니까 뭐 예를 들면 이제 그러니까 지금의 시선으로 보면 뭐 미투라던가 아니면 이제 장애인에 대한 어떤 그런 차별적인 시선이라던가 이런 것들이 이제 고전 작품에서 굉장히 두드러지게 드러나기도 하지 않습니까? 이제 아까 케이트 발제에서도 리처드 3세에 대한 이야기 하셨던 것처럼요. 이제 그런 편견이 담긴 작품들을 우리가 어떻게 읽고 어떻게 이야기 나눠야 될까에 대해서 질문을 주셨는데요. 아까 이제 케이트의 미스 줄리 작업은 좀 더 그 차별 자체를 더 전복적으로 드러내고 어떻게 보면 이것이 차별이라는 걸 주장하는 작업이 아니었나라는 생각은 듭니다. 전해 들을 때요. 네, 아무튼 한국의 관객이 지금 케이트에게 이런 질문을 드렸는데요. 케이트 답변해 주시겠습니까?
Thank you. Fascinating question. I think intersectionality, that very current and sexy word, comes into play here. I think it's really interesting when we use different lenses through which we consider artwork or plays of the past. I think it's useful to know what were the values and the politics and the history of the time of the classic, and then also to see what may be the useful setting or approach where we can throw light and create shadows as well as illumination on these Western classic plays. So as I said, with my Miss Julie, I set it at a time when the British hierarchy was threatened. It was the end of the First World War, and also the end of domestic service, which was very strongly the class system, where people were working as maids and servants for the more wealthy. And after just the historical experience of the First World War, this was changed. So for me, to look at a time of uncertainty and change historically and politically, there was the fight for the vote, universal suffrage. There were what they called the surplus women, over 2 million women who would have been married were denied that future because of the slaughter in the trenches. And so just talking about from an educational point of view, by being able to look at a classic piece, perhaps through either the lens of, like you said, the Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, that will also create a fascinating new perspective. But also in my work, by me finding another historical context to set that play in, it's almost like it broadens even more the subjects and the areas that we can explore, and hopefully have some resonance for our times, because we also are now in a time of pandemic. 1919 was the Spanish flu, a so-called Spanish flu, which was also a time of pandemic. It was, we're at a point where hopefully we can completely reinvent ourselves and renew ourselves. And for me, that was important to find a time historically to set the piece in that could have resonance for us historically, but also in contemporary moments. So I think intersectionality is really interesting. I think looking at different histories and cultures and perspectives can be also very illuminating. And also what I will do is, I wrote a piece with Philip Zerilli called Richard III Redux, or Sarah Beer is not Richard III. And that was a piece that we made 2 years ago, which was taking Shakespeare's Richard III, which is a deeply problematic text. And we actually made a piece of work that was feminist crip perspective, as a way educationally, but also hopefully as entertainment, where we were answering back to some of these problematic representations in the Western theatrical canon. So that's part of the strategies I will use, depending on where I put the setting, if I'm staying quite close to the original or actually having a complete conversation piece answering back.
케이트 이야기를 들으니까 작품이 더 궁금해지는데요. 저는 그 이야기를 하시면서 시대적 변화의 시대적 배경을 변화시킴으로써 그 탐구의 주제를 확장시킨다라고 말씀하셨던 부분이 굉장히 인상적입니다. 그러니까 어떤 고전의 가치라는 것이 고전이니까 고전이고 가치 있는 것이 아니라 사실 우리가 뭔가 도전적인 주제로 그것을 해체하고 읽어낼 것이 있을 때 고전도 고전이 되고 가치가 있는 것이 아닌가 싶습니다. 저희가 준비한 질문이 지금 한 세션이 또 남았는데요. 시간이 조금 부족하긴 하지만 좀 짧게라도 진행해 보고자 합니다. 사실 아마도 두 연출께서 공연을 준비하시면서 KT한테 물어보고 싶은 것이 상당히 많으셨을 것 같아요. 근데 이제 지금 이미 공연을 올린 다음에 우리가 이렇게 만나게 됐는데요. 그래서 제가 지금 시간이 좀 부족해서요. 두 연출께 혹시 KT에게 질문하고 싶으셨던 거 있는지 좀 짧게 두 분이 한꺼번에 질문해 주시고 KT 답변하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 두 분 질문 부탁드립니다.
예, 제가 먼저 할게요. 나인 프리다라는 작품 안에는 마야 문명에 대한 색채가 많이 담겨 있습니다. 저도 이 작품을 준비를 하면서 제가 마야 문명, 아즈텍 문명에 대한 이해가 별로 없다 보니까 나름 이렇게 마야 문명과 관련된 아즈텍 문명과 관련된 리서치를 좀 많이 하게 됐었고 역시 마찬가지로 프리다 칼로에 대한 작품 또한 많이 이해하고 그의 생애에 대해서 이해를 많이 하려고 했습니다. 그러다 보니까 이 마야 문명에서 만들어내고 있는 어떤 죽음의 세계라는 것들이 무섭고 고통스럽지만 삶의 세계에서 죽음의 세계로 건너가는 어떤 과정이 비극적이고 두려운 과정이 아니라 하나의 어떤 통과 의례 그리고 신에게 다가가는 과정, 그래서 그 어떤 완성이자 환희의 순간으로 여기는 그런 태도가 이 마야 문명에서 죽음을 대하는 태도에서 드러나는 대단히 특징적인 어떤 인상들이었고 이런 부분들이 이 희곡 안에서도 어느 정도 담겨 있다고 생각을 했습니다. 이런 것들이 아마 멕시코의 망자의 날이라고 대표되는 축제의 모습에서도 좀 드러나는 부분들이기는 한데요. 이런 어떤 축제와도 같은 죽음에 대한 세계로 다가가는 부분들을 현대로 가져온다라는 것은 어떤 의미일까? 이런 고민이 좀 들었습니다. 한국에서도 사실은 근대 이전까지만 하더라도 장례식을 잔치, 파티로 이해했던 그런 관념이 좀 있었으나 지금은 사실은 많이 사라진 관념이 되는데요. 이런 어떤 죽음의 세계를 다가가는 세계, 어떤 축제와도 같은 세계를 현대화시키는 것이 어떤 의미인지 작가로서 조금 질문을 드려보고 작가에게 질문으로서 질문 드려보고 싶었습니다.
I think what you have said sums up very much why I chose this. I think it's very important in our contemporary times to try and stop seeing death as a taboo, and instead for us to be brave and talk about it. And so I've been involved in many projects. The Nine Fridas is one, where I've tried to encourage an audience to reflect on this fearful thing, which perhaps we shouldn't see as fearful, because it's very natural. It's actually the natural conclusion to our existence. And so in my work, I'm often hoping to make death less fearful, to bring it into the conversation, and perhaps it will have an impact for us to talk about that or reflect about that afterwards as audiences. So I'm keeping a short answer.
네, 감사합니다. 이어서 안정민 연출님 질문 부탁드립니다.
네, 일단 짧게 감상을 제가 준비를 했었는데 엄청 짧게 읽도록 하겠습니다. 우선 이 작품을 창조해 주셔서 감사하다는 말씀을 먼저 다시 한번 전해드릴게요. 물속이라는 다른 질감의 공간을 열어주셔서 감사합니다. 우리가 오래전부터 가지고 있었으나 어느 순간 잊어버린 아가미 같은 것을 상상했습니다. 작품 속 단어를 소중히 읽으며 마치 새로운 언어를 만나는 것 같았고요. 그것은 통렬함과 솔직함의 감각을 전유하는 것이고 어떤 사회든 문화든 정치든 나보다 크다고 여겨지는 어떤 것으로부터 무엇이 주어지든 간에 어떤 허락에도 만족하지 않고 그 너머를 원하는 그런 치열함이었다고 생각합니다. 제가 이 희곡이 너무나 아름답게 풍자적이었기 때문에 모두 빠뜨리지 않고 읽고 싶었지만 희곡을 읽으면서 당사자성을 살릴 수 없는 많은 부분을 낭독 공연에 포함시키지 않는 선택을 하게 되었습니다. 읽으면 읽을수록 당사자성이 매우 중요한 작품이라고 생각했기 때문에 읽지 않는 길을 선택했습니다. 이 희곡이 조용히 담담하고 광적이게 그러면서도 포착당하지 않고 끈기 있는 노력으로 자기 자신으로 읽어야 된다고 생각했기 때문입니다. 그러니까 요컨대 이 희곡은 나의 말로 가득 차야 된다고 생각했습니다. 작가님의 장의 미학과 접근성의 미학에 있어서 이러한 당사자성이 가지고 있는 중요성에 대해서 저희는 이미 충분히 들었지만 다시 한번 중요한 부분이니 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠고요. 아직은 다행히 가능한 상태 inabled에 놓여 있는 저는 이 희곡이 열어주는 많은 감각들에 다가가고자 노력하는 것이 필요했다는 점을 고백드립니다. 바로 이런 점에서 저는 물속에 나는 무게가 없어라는 작품은 번역자, 모든 스텝과 연출 모두 장애인 당사자여야 하지 않았나라는 생각이 드는데요. 이 점에 있어서 작가님은 어떻게 생각하시는지 듣고 싶습니다.
네, 당사자성에 대한 질문 주셨습니다. 케이트 답변 부탁드립니다.
Wonderful. Again, thank you both. You've had such rich responses and questions. I really appreciate it. Several things. I think I'm a woman, but I write male characters. I think we can be non-disabled, but still, through our compassion and empathy, understand certain things that may not be the lived experience that is specifically ours. But I think we, I love an all-deaf and disabled cast. I love a whole production that would be so. But it's also not necessary because as long as communication is there, for example, as I mentioned earlier, in the original production, the non-disabled director got the actors to choose which monologues they wanted. So the monologues and in Water I'm Weightless is not a play per se. It's a collection of monologues, and I wanted to create a body of work that people could pick and choose from and make their own new versions, change the dramaturgy and the order of them. And so I'm kind of offering it up as an offering to my collaborators and the artists involved to take it and make it relevant and surprise us all with the new perspectives and the new order. And I don't mind certain sections being used or not. There is also the possibility of having new monologues created that would be specifically for a Korean context. So when I did my second international D monologue project, it was with Singapore, and we ended up calling the piece "And Suddenly I Disappear." And that was a combination of stories and monologues that I had written specifically inspired by conversations with disabled and deaf individuals in Singapore. That might also be something that would be possible with Korea in the future. So you have an international perspective. They may be coming from Britain, but then you may also have some that are coming, for example, from Korea. I think, yes, I think it's very important for us to try and say what of this work has resonance for our time, and for us to choose and pick accordingly. and perhaps enter a space with the cast who are disabled and deaf to, maybe have or to bring on a co-director who might be disabled or deaf, which may also be a way of having that sense of shared perspectives and politics and culture. For example, in our production with National Theatre Wales, Johnny McGrath, the director, brought on an assistant director, Sarah Beer, who is a long-term collaborator of mine and is a wonderful performer and activist, and who is also disabled. So that's also a way of getting this kind of richness and rich conversation happening, so that we don't necessarily have to go, oh, that you can't do that because you haven't had that lived experience. I have not had the lived experience of being a man, but I do write male characters. So I think it's possible for us to find the human and to find the empathy to be able to communicate and represent.
네, 케이트 감사합니다. 그 당사자성의 문제가 자체 창작 과정에서의 다양성을 배제하거나 관점의 어떤 다양한 관점의 공존을 배제하거나 억압하는 방식이 되어서는 안 된다라는 말씀인 것 같습니다. 네, 이렇게 해서 저희가 준비한 이야기는 모두 마쳤습니다. 지금 무장애 예술 주간 프로그램으로요. 탭톡 세 번째 시간, 영국의 장애 운동과 장애 예술의 역사 그리고 희곡에 대해서 케이트의 발표와 그다음에 이제 그 나인프리다와 물속에서 나는 무게가 없다 두 작품을 각각 연출한 안경모 연출, 안정민 연출과 함께 이야기를 나눠봤습니다. 또 더 많은 이야기를 나눌수록 더 하고 싶은 이야기들이 더 많아지기는 하는데요. 궁금한 것들도 점점 많아지고요. 하지만 또 우리가 이런 팬데믹 시대에 이렇게 온라인으로 연결해서 또 이렇게 대화를 이어가 보는 것도 상당히 흥미롭고 흥미로운 과정이었던 것 같습니다. 거의 시간이 다 되긴 했지만 그래도 우리가 어렵게 만났으니까 마지막으로 케이트의 인사 한 말을 좀 듣고 접으면 어떨까 싶습니다. 케이트, 오늘 토론회에 대한 소감, 마무리 인사 부탁드릴게요.
Thank you. It's really important. Part of my talk, it was quite negative, talking about the current situation and the realities that disabled and deaf people are facing, not just in the UK, but around the world. And I really can't reiterate enough how wonderful and important it is for us to be trying to move forward to a more just and fair and equal society, to include so many who have been excluded for so long, and to have this opportunity to share, to connect. We may not be in the same space, but I still think that our hearts are beating together. So I thank you for that.
네, 만나게 돼서 감사합니다. 그리고 두 분 연출님들 좋은 이야기 나눠주셔서 감사합니다. 네, 이것으로 톡 세 번째 시간은 마무리하도록 하겠습니다. 지켜봐 주셔서 감사합니다. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.